This is the Reluctant Leader Podcast, the podcast designed to help you step out of the shadows and become an inspirational leader. I'm your host, Mark Terrell, and each episode I will be getting to grips with a leadership topic by interviewing an expert in their field. I'll be picking their brains for those golden nuggets that will help you be the best you can be. Make sure you don't miss an episode by subscribing at thereluctantleader.co.uk, and please feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. So let's get on with the show. Today I'm talking to Oliver Parker, who is MD and founder of Capability Consulting, an executive search consultancy focused on hiring for growth. They identify the leadership and expert capabilities needed to drive business growth and then find the one outstanding person who will best deliver. Hope you enjoy this chat about creating that dream team we all need, and I will catch you on the other side. So Oliver, welcome to the Reluctant Leader Podcast.
Thank you very much.
I've met you a few times, and we always have an interesting discussion about hiring and recruitment and all the ins and outs. So I'm looking forward to an interesting conversation. Before we go down that route and start talking about how we can hire our best team, just tell us about why you do what you do and what was the pivotal moment that took you down this path.
I suppose first I'd probably say that I've been doing it for a long time, but not all of that time quite the way that I do it now. Mm-hmm. So I started off in recruitment more than 20 years ago, and I was working with one of the big national, big names in the recruitment sector. And I liked the idea of, even then of making a big difference for a company that I was recruiting for and for that person's career. Mm-hmm. To be honest, though, it wasn't quite what I expected when I got into it. And if I summarize by saying that my boss had one rule that he used to drill into us, which was spray and pray.
Dear.
It basically meant that you'd get a job on, as many jobs on as possible, and then you'd get as many CVs that sort of vaguely were relevant to them, and then throw them at your clients so that they didn't have time to speak to any other recruiters, and hopefully one of those CVs would fit. And it was hit very, very hit or miss, to be honest, the results. So about 15 years ago almost, I set up my first recruitment company with the aim of doing it better than that. And that's really, in terms of pivotal moment, it's evolved over that time. But really, a couple of years ago, when I set up my existing company, which is Capability Consulting, I made the decision to do it without compromise. In terms of being that much more thorough and diligent in the recruitment process, which is what I do. Mm-hmm. I had been doing that for a while, but now I just decided that in order to get the right results for the businesses I was working with, I really needed to do it, as I say, without compromise. And I think that was the change, and that's the basis of this company, really.
Right. No more spray and pray.
No more spray and pray.
No, that doesn't seem like a great philosophy when you're trying to hire the right people for the right job.
I think it's a terrible philosophy, but it's a very common one, to be honest. Still,
yes.
It always surprises me that the recruitment industry and even the way that employers generally approach recruitment is often the same.
Mm. Yes.
I think it's just the way that people have grown up with it.
Yes. Yeah. I suppose it's habit, isn't it? People just assume that's the way things are.
Exactly.
And I think from my experience, when people start talking about recruitment, would it be fair to say they have a similar sort of, I generally get the same sort of reaction to when maybe we're talking about estate agents. They're in the same sort of bracket. They're not really held in much esteem.
Well, I think absolutely. Very similar sort of perception of the industry. And in most cases, I think it's perfectly fairly deserved.
Right.
I think recruitment isn't it's not a cheap service, and therefore, if you're going to demand significant fees, then really you should put a lot of work into it and get the result. You should be able to guarantee that you're going to get the result that the business wants.
Yeah,
and that isn't common in the recruitment industry, unfortunately.
No. Okay. So what we're obviously going to talk about how we can hire the right team member and obviously grow the right team. For any business leader, that's important because it's not about them doing it all themselves. They need the right people around them.
Yeah.
So you've written a really interesting document which you've called Hiring for Growth, which has lots of tips around how you can find the right people. And the things I picked a few things out actually that were interesting. Actually, one thing that jumped out at me was that it's not just a one-way thing; it's a two-way. So it has to be for the employer and the employee to have success. Do you want to just explain what you mean by that?
Absolutely. Fundamentally, it really has to be a win-win scenario. The way that most companies and most recruiters approach recruitment is that they create a job spec, which is vaguely the responsibilities under the role. They find a load of CVs by advertising or through a recruiter, whatever means. And the ones that sort of match enough, they then decide to interview those people. And there's no real sharing of information about what the opportunity really is, what the role really needs to achieve. The responsibilities that are usually on a job description are often very different from what that role genuinely needs to achieve. And I think, again, you mentioned bad habits. This is something that it's sort of fairly endemic, and people tend to do that. And so when somebody goes for an interview, they're selling themselves. The company is trying to sell itself. There's a kind of standard facade that everybody has in an interview.
Yes.
You don't meet the real person. And so the candidate just doesn't find out if that really is the right opportunity for them. And the worst case scenario for me is to go through, although I can see for a business, is to go through all of that process of recruitment, and then for the person to come in and 3 weeks or 3 months down the line, realize that they made a terrible mistake.
Mm-hmm.
And, there's a huge proportion of people in the UK. Gallup produce a report called The State of the Workforce. I think it's every 3 years or maybe every 4 years. And in 2017, they recorded that 92% of the UK workforce were disengaged from their work. Only 8% were actually engaged in what they did, actively engaged.
That's quite staggering, isn't it?
It's just, it had gone up really. It was, I think, 85% in 2014 or whatever. So it's getting worse. And I think what happens is that very often people recruit, and then a few months down the line, potentially that person leaves, which causes you cost, time, lots of hassle, or even worse, they end up staying.
Yes.
Who wants somebody who's that disengaged, maybe even to the point of being disruptive in their business? So the business ends up getting run or operated by a core few people, and the rest are they're getting a paycheck, but they're not really delivering very much, or receiving. No, they're not enjoying it.
Yeah, I guess it's the better the devil you know scenario, isn't it? That most people say, well, they might get better or things might change. Better stick at it rather than go through the turmoil of finding someone to replace, because it's quite a process, isn't it? It's something that nobody really relishes.
It's very difficult. It's difficult for both sides, and I think you're absolutely right. I think often the candidates stay in a role that they're not happy with. And probably not doing a very good job in because they're not happy in it. And they stay there because the process is a nightmare.
Yeah.
And it is very difficult to in most recruitment scenarios to gauge whether this company or these people are really people that you want to work with until it's too late. So I think that win-win scenario is hugely important. That really just means knowing exactly what the opportunity is up front, and being prepared to share sort of warts and all what the reality is of the role.
Yeah, and that's the interesting thing, isn't it? And a lot of people find difficulty with that, isn't it? We've got to put some sort of front on, and we're talking about both sides here, aren't we? So the whoever's recruiting and the recruitee, if they're both putting a front on, when it comes to the actual, when they start, it's really going to be a problem, isn't it? Because, all of a sudden the veils come down and the real business and the real person match, or they try to match, and maybe they don't. I guess that's the scenario, isn't it?
Absolutely. I think it's interesting that companies or hirers, leaders of teams, often forget that recruitment is actually a marketing process. Like finding a new member for a team is very much like finding a new customer for your business. And if you go out there and sell your business to everyone and put a pretty veil over everything so that it all seems very attractive to everyone, then you're going to get some happy customers, but a lot of them are going to be fairly unhappy, and business is going to be really hard. And exactly the same with recruiting people. If you attract everyone just with the basic talents that needed for the job, then a lot of them just aren't going to be very happy and aren't going to deliver. Where if you market the role effectively and target the people who are really going to get what that business is about and want to deliver it. But also be aware that it's okay to put off, if you like, the people who aren't going to fit. Why waste your time with those people? Why waste their time?
Yeah. So what sort of tips would you give around marketing a role? And I guess some part of that marketing will be around the values of the business and what the goals of the business are.
I think that's really important. One of the things I do is I'm fairly skeptical of job descriptions, as in the traditional sense. But I do create a kind of role profile, something that describes the essence of the role, how the company operates, what's great about this role, what's not. Again, the warts and all scenario, which will appeal to a certain kind of person, to the person who will really excel in that role and in that business. And other people would look at it and think, "Oh my God, I don't want to work there," which is great. You don't need to waste your time with those people. And it's like I mentioned, it's more of a marketing document. Same effort should go into appealing to that person's emotions and connecting with them. And it's not just a list of responsibilities. It's what can they get from the role, from the business? What challenges? What can they offer? People like to do good work. They really do. People want to go to work and do something brilliant for the company. Nobody wants to go to work and be disengaged and begging for Friday afternoon. And if you find somebody who really wants to be there, the rest of the getting what you need from them is easy.
Yeah, and absolutely, I back that up because with the work I do, I know that majority of people are very much driven by making a difference and feeling they're making a difference. And obviously, that's another issue, really, is to make sure that your team actually feel they are making a difference. And probably time that's for another conversation. But it's interesting when you get to that, go through the process. Obviously, once you find people that might fit the job description and might be the right sort of people, how do you conduct the interview so that you bring out the things that you are really important to you and your business?
Well, I think there's something very important has to happen before the interview. And this is relatively easy if you're using a recruiter, but a business leader can do it themselves. And that's the sort of pre-interview phase, getting in touch with the candidate, usually initially over the phone, and actually finding out what their aims are in life, in their career. What things do they really want in terms of the talents that they have? What do they really think they want to use going forward? So one of the problems is if you present a job, an opportunity, let's say, to a candidate, it's another human nature thing. Even if they don't want the job, they'll usually try and sell themselves into it.
Right.
We can't help ourselves. Somebody sells us in the job. We say, "Oh yeah, I'd be perfect for that. I'd be really good at that."
Yeah.
And this is what happens in interview. People can't help themselves but to be positive and promotional, self-promotional. So if you ask them about themselves and about what really motivates them, what really drives them, what sort of opportunity they really want up front as a broader question, and then if they give you the clues to which seem to match the opportunity that you have, then you go into talking about the opportunity. And when you talk about the opportunity, it's really important to be very, very upfront in terms of going back to that warts and all aspect. Tell the person the pros and the cons. And if they can't take the cons, you've had a lucky escape. They don't, and they're not going to come on board.
Yeah.
So all of that needs to happen, in my view, but well before the interview. Yeah. So that when you get to the interview scenario, instead of having this typical sort of theatrical facade on of selling oneself, the candidate's coming in really to have a discussion about how they're going to help achieve your business objectives.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's a real frank discussion, person to person, none of this nonsense that normally happens. Because let's be honest, the standard interview process is maybe an hour, 2 if you're lucky.
Yeah.
It's not enough to really get to know somebody, especially if that facade is on.
Yeah. What interests me, again, going back to the Hiring for Growth document, is some of the questions you encourage asking. One of the questions is about their boss's last name. Can you explain about how that's useful?
Well, there's this sort of typical thing everybody asks about people's strengths and weaknesses, and which, obviously we really do want to know what their strengths and weaknesses are. The trouble is everybody knows that we're going to ask this question. So yeah. Everybody had a kind of pre-prepared response to that.
I'm a team player and all that sort of stuff. Yeah.
Yes. I'm such a perfectionist that I won't stop them, working until I've got the perfect result for my boss. That kind of
Yes.
So in order to get around that kind of canned response, I've got it's actually 5 steps to it. So start off by asking their last boss's name. And then you actually ask them to spell out the full name. That second part is really important. It really focuses their attention because you haven't actually said so, but it really strongly implies that you are intent on speaking to that person after you've had this conversation. And so you're going to have a comparison against. So it puts them on the point of actually realizing that they're going to need to tell you the truth straight away. And then you ask them, tell me about Joe Bloggs, whatever the boss's name. What would they like to work with? And this isn't a question asking about them. It's about the question is about their boss, but it tells you an awful lot about how they related to them and what they got from that relationship. And then the third step is to ask, what could they have done or perhaps done differently that would have enhanced that working relationship with that previous boss?
Right.
And that tells you it gives you an idea that there are two types of people. There are usually people who are problem solvers, or there are people who are problem bringers.
Okay, so you can sort of pick up in their language and the way they describe things whether they are a solver or a bringer.
Absolutely,
yeah.
Because we another thing we tend to do in interviews is we tend to ask questions that lead them to a certain answer.
Yes.
So let's say, for example, you want somebody who's got a strength in I don't know, people management. You might ask them a question. Can you tell me about a scenario when you solved a problem, an attitude problem amongst your team? And how did you fix it? It's really hard for people not to put that bit on the end. And how did you fix it? Or how did you solve the problem? Mm-hmm. And once you've asked that leading past the question, you're drawing out effectively a false positive. They're only going to answer in a positive way. Mm-hmm. But just going back to the 5-parter, so stage 3, once you've asked what they could have done differently, then you say, so when I speak to Joe Bloggs, what will he tell me that your strengths are? And because, again, you've implied that you're going to be speaking to Joe Bloggs, they start telling you about their own strengths, their real strengths, not just the canned response version. And then lastly, you say something to put a pleasant spin on it. You can say something like, so we've all got areas we'd like to improve. So when I speak to Joe Bloggs, what do you think he'll tell me your weaknesses are? And again, they're put on the spot, and they'll probably give you a pretty accurate answer. Strengths and weaknesses. And that, for everybody, every role that you recruit, that's going to be crucial.
Yeah.
But it's actually quite hard to get that truth from.
Yeah, absolutely. I was going to ask you, from an employer, if so, we're talking about someone in a leadership position that's trying to recruit the right person. How do they actually get that across how do they actually describe like the business? What tips would you give them to how to do that, and what process do you think they should have gone before then?
It's interesting you say that, because I mean I take this to a degree for granted, because it's obviously something I do all the time. But even if a recruiter, a hirer is planning on doing their own recruitment, I think they should do this. It starts off. I have 2 rules in order to get the result which I want, which my clients want, which is no compromise in terms of the person that they hire. Absolutely, the person that's going to make the most difference. It always has to start with not making assumptions. And we do this so easily. We make assumptions about our business, about the kind of people that are out there. Recruiters do it. They claim to be sort of sector specialists or this sort of thing. And because they think they know their market, they make assumptions. And I think the process has to start with deep research or if you're not using, if a business is not using a recruiter, then sort of a deep introspection on what does the business really trying to achieve? What does this role need to achieve to achieve the objectives of the business? Are there specific outcomes? Very often people recruit a person and then they might find themselves disappointed 6 months later because they never actually said what they need that person to achieve, and that person's in the role is probably confused as well. But if you analyze what realistic outcomes need to be achieved right at the beginning, that helps you to evaluate the candidates that are coming through. I don't know, let's say it's a sales role, and the person needs to achieve £100,000 of new business in the first 6 months, just for argument's sake.
Yeah.
You can start then thinking about questions about their previous experience to see if they've done that kind of level of sales before. But if you don't have that kind of fairly specific outcome in your mind when you're interviewing, it's quite difficult to benchmark the person who's coming through.
Yeah.
You mentioned values earlier on. Values are hugely important.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of business leaders kind of think they have a pretty good idea of their values and their business values, but it's not always that clear, and it usually doesn't come through in a recruitment process. So sometimes it can be worth sort of revisiting that and really. Sorry.
No, I was just going to say something. You talk about. I was just going to say about mindset, really, and you talk about going into it with the right objectives, but also it's having the right mindset. Almost telling yourself that the right person is there. I've just got to do the right things to attract that person. If you go in with the wrong mindset around, there's only a certain amount of people and it's going to be really difficult and all those sort of things. But if you go in with the mindset of, the right person's out there somewhere, I need just to do everything I need to do as much as I possibly can to attract them.
Yes, absolutely.
There's a lot of mindset.
I think a lot of people have had really bad experience. You started off by talking about the perception of recruitment industry, and I think a lot of that's because people have had bad experiences. They've recruited and it's turned out a disaster, and that leaves a sour taste in your mouth, and it leaves you thinking that it's actually a really difficult and a really complicated process. And I don't believe it is. I think I'm a huge believer that there's an enormous pool of talented people out there, and there are definitely people that will fit any business, any scenario. It just takes time and effort and being meticulous and thorough to find that person. And I think a normal recruitment process will probably go through, they might get 10, 20 CVs and hope that one of those fits. I mean, when I go through a sourcing process, for most roles that I look at, I'll probably consider at least 200 or 300, often 500 or more as that first stage. So if you think about it, just from a numbers point of view, the odds of me finding the right person are significantly higher just because I've gone through 10 times or 20 times as many people.
Right, yeah.
I tend to, when I'm talking to potential clients, I usually suggest that out of every 100 people, on average out of every 100 people who have got the right core sort of talents, the skills and experience, probably about one in 100 of them will fit in terms of the attitude and the motivation that they need as well to really fully use the talent they've got for the best benefit of that business. So on that basis, if you go through 200 or 300 candidates, all of whom on paper could do the job, you've got a pretty good chance of finding one who will be really outstanding. Yeah.
And you mentioned the first rule that you use. So I'm assuming there's a second one.
Well, the first rule is to start the process with no assumptions.
Yeah.
And that allows you then, the second rule is to finish it with no compromise.
Yeah.
And there's also a principle sort of behind those two rules, which is that recruitment processes normally tend to be driven by talent. They're the skills and experience that people think they need for a certain role. But if you expand that a little bit to look for somebody who not only has the talent, but also gets what the business really wants to achieve. And thirdly, really wants, has the motivation to achieve that same objective, then that person is going to really use that talent. So if you follow that principle of finding, yes, the talent, the skills and the experience, but also somebody who really gets what the business wants and wants it at the same time, then you're onto a winner. And you can do that by starting the process with no assumptions.
Yeah.
So you can finish it with no compromise.
Yeah. Yeah. Brilliant. And we all like a what should we call it, equation or a way to work things out, and that, you know, that seems to make just such sense. You know, the talent is, like you say, the most recruiters talk about that, but if they don't get it and they don't want it, then, you know, ultimately it's not going to be someone that's going to stick around, or worse still, someone that you don't want to stick around, and they do.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. Unfortunately, time has I've run past again. It seems to run quickly when I do these podcasts. So right at the end, we like to sort of sum up a bit, and what I tend to ask my interviewees is to give us some top tips that you would give, and in this case, to recruit the right people for their team.
Okay. Well, first one is to use that guiding principle, not just to focus on talent or the skills and the experience, which is the bit that you see on somebody's CV. Mm-hmm. You know, somebody being good on paper is just not enough. So the principle is look for talent plus get somebody who gets what your business wants to achieve. In order to find that out, you have to share with them warts and all. And thirdly, that they really want to achieve it as well, so that they've got that motivation to really put that talent to use for your business. So that guiding principle of talent plus gets it plus wants it, it would be tip number one. Tip number two would be to start the process. Even though you know a lot about your business, start the hiring process with no assumptions. Look at the mission of the business, what it needs to achieve. Look at the outcomes that the role should focus on, values, plus obviously the talent, and also the what I call the X factor, the attitudes, the traits that will work in your business. And write all of that down and use that as the basis for the questions in the pre-interview assessment, which is what you might do over the phone before you meet the person face to face.
Yeah.
And then finally, when you're interviewing the candidates and through the whole sort of sourcing process, don't compromise. There is always somebody outstanding available somewhere. It just takes a bit of effort to find them.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, thank you, Oliver. It's been a great. I've really enjoyed talking about this subject, because it's such an important part of a leadership role is to find the right people to work with, so that you can get the success and take the business where you really want to take it. So, thank you again for your time. For now, we'll say goodbye, and hopefully we'll speak again sometime.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Mark. Appreciate it.
Thank you for listening today. As action leads to outcomes, make sure you make a note to start, stop, or continue doing whatever struck a chord in this episode. Don't forget to subscribe at thereluctantleader.co.uk, where you'll find links to all the past episodes, vlogs, blogs, and how you can get in touch with me. Until next time, bye for now.